afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Trader Merlin Show for the beginning of the Space Odyssey 1001. I'm 1,000 shows away from the Space Odyssey, which would be 2001, but we'll get there in another 4 years or so. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Trivia Tuesday, Taco Tuesday. Hope it was a good day for you out there. Not if you're long, especially if you're long on that tech stock. So it was a rough day out there for chip makers and a couple different things that need to be addressed here, particularly for those of us who are looking at longer term prospects for AI and technology. My graphic wasn't really the best today. I thought that I could do a little bit better with my Midjourney AI here. But the title of the show today, Chip Meltdown. Now, what happened? Well, we've been on a phenomenal run. If you look at SMH, which is one of the ETFs for semiconductors, one of the broader ones, it's been doing great, particularly since those lows we saw back in early August. It's just been making higher highs, higher lows. Granted, a ways to go before we get to those all-time highs, or just at least the highs we saw back here in July, but looking great. So what derailed this? Why all of a sudden this about face where things started to look real ugly and people panicking about chip makers? Well, it was twofold. The first piece that came out was an early release of ASML's earnings. They were supposed to release tomorrow. Well, they somehow released those today. And in there was a lot of talk about slowdowns, depressing forecasts, a real contraction over in China. Now remember, ASML is one of these companies, I forget the exact technology it is, but it's their lithograph. I think that's the L in their title. But they sell equipment to manufacturers like Taiwan Semiconductor and NVIDIA, major producers, Intel as well. They're making these special chips that need a very, very thin wafer technology, and I guess ASML is the king of that one. So if they are forecasting a significant slowdown on the infrastructure piece, then that leads people to believe that going forward, we're going to see things look a bit weaker for chips overall. So because of that bad earnings, you'll show you what happened here to ASML right now. Yeah, the accidental release, right, Big Eb? That's always questionable. There's your monster drop today in ASML, but let's be honest, you look at that chart, it looks like some people knew what was going on before. I mean, it was down 20%. Now you're down about almost 30% from those peaks we saw just a little while ago here in July of this year. So ASML obviously getting punished. It's up a little bit in the after-hour session, and this is one of those ones that I look at, and I mentioned this before with many of you, like one of my things I love to do is I always have dry powder, if you will, in the markets. And when you have a company that is a bellwether, they're absolutely critical to some part of the economy, then when they have a big down day like today, or maybe even bigger than today, begs the question, is it a buying opportunity? Do you look at that and say, hey, it's down 16% today alone, maybe I'll sell some puts on that bad boy, collect it down around maybe the 650 mark, somewhere on there, and collect that premium. And you could certainly do that. The question is, what's the risk involved there? And if the forecasts are that is going to be a continued slowdown in the chip making area, then maybe that 650 mark isn't the best place to buy here. Now, I just threw that number out because it's one of the first ones I saw here on the screen, but there's some nice unfilled gaps that go all the way back down to right around $600. You can tell from this kind of longer term chart here that 560 mark could certainly be reached. And while I don't think it will get crushed that much, it certainly could. Big Eb says selling puts on ASML would have been a good move. I was golfing. Well, you got to enjoy that retirement, buddy. Enjoy it. It's a beautiful day. But yeah, this is one that I didn't look at the premium on it today because I was just busy, but I may check this one out tomorrow. I do think that ASML is one of those companies that's not going anywhere. I think that they are certainly a bellwether. They're entrenched. They're not a DJT, which is kind of a shrug your shoulders. They lose money every quarter. These guys are doing pretty good. And the earnings release that came out today, let me click that little E down here at the bottom. They were expected to come out with $5.40 per share. They reported $5.75 per share. So this, again, is why you never trade earnings, because you would have been like, yay, we beat earnings by a good margin. I'm going to make a bunch of money today. Womp, womp, down 16%. Now, this is one I'll have to keep an eye on over the next couple of days to see if it does fall further. Right now, I think it's created a bit of panic in the technology sector, particularly with a lot of these chip makers. So it wasn't just ASML that had a bit of a crushing today. Look at NVIDIA. Remember, NVIDIA is a client of ASML. So is Taiwan Semiconductor, who buys, who NVIDIA gets a lot of their chips from. So NVIDIA's drop wasn't as bad. You're at 4.69% down today. Granted, that chart still looks absolutely amazing. Did this nice little double top here at all-time highs, so that's kind of interesting as well. We'll see if that holds and drop us back down to this upward sloping trend line. But NVIDIA taking a hit. TSM, Taiwan Semiconductor down 2.64% on the day. Again, double top on that as well. So it looks just like NVIDIA's chart here. So for those fading double tops, you might have an idea, a good play here. AMD is another one. AMD was down 5.22%, although its chart looks a lot weaker than what we just saw with the Taiwan Semiconductor and NVIDIA, down 5.22. You could also look at Intel. Intel took a little bit of a hit, 3.33%. So all in all, I think that this is going to create a buying opportunity for anybody in the chip space or looking to acquire some of these chip companies. Now, granted, it's a tiny little drop for some of them. ASML is obviously the big daddy, the big drop. Oops, ASML, can't even type today. ASML is the other big factor here. You know, this one is certainly a big player and is down huge. I do think that this will probably be a decent buy here at some lower levels. I just don't know exactly where. I don't see us getting all the way back down to 560 on ASML, but they did paint a fairly negative forecast for their company going forward. Steve says ASML could easily get down to 575 area. Yeah, I certainly think it's possible. And that wouldn't, I don't think that would seem like that much of a stretch. Let's look at what percentage drop that would be if we got down from our peak down to 575 that you mentioned. That would be a slide of roughly 48%. I'll tell you, I'd be a buyer at a 50% decline in ASML's value. I would be a buyer of that. I just ask myself the simple question. Do I think that chips are going to be going away? Are we going to stop using semiconductors? And I know everybody here would just laugh at that statement because we all know we're using more of them, right? We'll be using more and more chips and semiconductors. So I think that there is a certain, I'm not going to say bulletproofness to it, but this codependency on the way that society is going on chips. So you said KLA 10 core as well with a little clack in there. Oh, clack was a big drop. And overall, if you look at KLA 10 core here, which is KLAC, you've got a beautiful uptrend. I mean, this thing has been absolutely fantastic for quite some time. Yes, it should have some pullback. And again, I think that creates a buying opportunity here for those who are interested in. Just got to find that right price that you are interested in as well. Now, as Big Eb points out, we do have some chip issues, right? This is a very interesting thing that's just potentially coming to market. And I love this graphic. It's got a American flag is the chip. The chip is America, right? As Big Eb says, the administration said they might restrict chips to the Middle Eastern countries. That hurt NVIDIA and AMD too. Absolutely. So that is the next track here is, first off, you have the earnings announcement by ASML. Really lousy forecast, particularly for China. Talked about China really kind of slowing down consumption of ASML products and services. Okay. But then you have the Biden administration limiting chip output potentially to Middle Eastern countries. They're too concerned from a security threat. We don't want them to have the technology. Okay, they'll get it, guys. They're going to get it from somewhere, man. It's insane to me. I'm like, what do they think that someone's not going to fly over to America, buy some chips, put them in a suitcase and go back home? I mean, anything's possible. So anyway, that sort of news created even more panic, which I think is great because it should push these prices down further. I, for one, like I said, I'm looking at acquiring some companies. KLA 10 core, I haven't traded that one for a long time. But you notice you're right down into a demand zone on KLA 10 core at $700. That's a pretty decent spot. I've talked about this in the past where different companies I'd be interested in. Oops. No, we're not doing that. Sorry. I'm on the wrong key. We talked about different companies that I'd like to buy into. And unfortunately, I didn't see Intel take a huge dump today. I'd love to see Intel have a much bigger sell-off so I could buy in cheaper here. I think Intel, given what's going on with government subsidies, maybe splitting their foundry and chip-making services into two separate companies, I think could do pretty good. So Noam says, do you think Intel is a buy or is a company dead? I don't think it's dead. I think I think their main focus is on a product that is dying, which is the standard PC CPU. I guess the question is, at what point does a CPU move completely obsolete and move over to GPUs? I would like to think that Intel has a little bit of foresight here and is working towards that end, meaning they're working on building more advanced chips, maybe getting into more GPU stuff, but they're still kind of clunky in the CPU space. There's a big article regarding U.S.-made chips being found in weapons of war. Russia, they were able to buy chips on the black market. Yeah, of course, right? I mean, look, if you really want to get around these issues, which, I mean, let's say I'm Iran and the U.S. wants Iran to have none of these chips. I think everybody in here, in about 30 seconds, can figure out a way to get all the chips that Iran needs. So all I would do is start a company in a country that is very friendly to the United States. Let's go to Canada. So I'll open up a company out of Canada or Mexico or some other country that has a nice relationship with the United States. And I'll start that little company there, call it Merlin's Exports. And I'll buy all the chips that I want, all the chips I can gather, and I will send those over from my Mexico foundry, Canada foundry, whatever, warehouse, and ship those directly over to Iran or some other country that's friendly with Iran, and that trail will just lead right back to them. So they could buy them on the black market. These things can find their way back to these countries. I think it's silly. The reason I like these statements that come out like this is because I think right away it creates fear and it creates panic. And when that happens, a lot of people are going to jump on that bandwagon of, oh man, this is bad for chip makers, and they start to sell, lock in their profits, prices drop significantly, and then gives us an opportunity to buy in at lower prices, and then we see that the earnings are still okay because people are still consuming chips. There ain't no secrets between enemies. That's true. Steve says the management's horrible. I don't know about the management of Intel, unfortunately. How much farther can Intel drop? It's half price. Look, I don't think Intel's going to go to zero. They're getting too much government money. So I don't think it's going to go that low. You know, that's why I like the little yellow box we had here. We talked about staying out of it until it broke out of this range. It broke out of the range, then retested on the 3rd of October, and now it's starting to move up. I still think, personally, I think Intel is actually a decent buy right now. And it's just because it's broken out, it's held, and it's staying there. Yes, it did have a down day today, but that really wasn't that much of an impact considering that you had, ASML down 16% and some others down pretty big numbers. I think this is actually a pretty good sign that it's holding. So, maybe just to put my money where my mouth is, I'll sell the $22 strike price, which is pretty close to current price, but that'd be right at that retest mark. Sell the 22s. I guess it wouldn't make me much money to do it for Friday, but maybe I will do it for Friday because I'll probably get some premium. So I will. I'll look to sell Intel $22 puts tomorrow just to see how it goes. We'll see what goes on in the morning. But yeah, I'm okay owning Intel long term. I think it'll be fine, especially with all the money that's being poured into it. So there we go. That's my take on it, Steve. Now, granted, that's not financial advice. That's just I'm telling you what I'm doing. So take that. I need to put disclaimers on here. I got to put a disclaimer somewhere. I've never done disclaimers, but it seems like every other show that talks about a market, if they even mentioned anything, they've got a disclaimer up front. So I'm going to probably have to throw something like that on here just from a compliance perspective. But yeah, this is a trade that I will look to make. It could lose money. That's fine with me. I'm worth taking. I'm okay to take that risk on that specific trade. I'm still buying those dips on NVIDIA. The reason NVIDIA makes me a little bit more nervous, I love NVIDIA as a company, but it's just when you have something that goes up so much, it generally has some pretty big corrections, and it has not had one yet. All right, this chart looks absolutely fantastic. Not only do you have an unbelievable uptrend, but you got this series of higher highs, higher lows. We just tapped up to that all-time high. Let me put a horizontal line across that top there. It's always so difficult to snag these things. There we go. So your all-time high on NVIDIA, split adjusted, of course, is 140.76. And as of yesterday, we had a high price intraday of 139.60. So pretty darn close to getting to all-time highs. But I would call that a double top. I do think you'll see a couple day worth of follow-through pullback here as people digest ASML's earnings. And then you also have some other big tech, on Netflix coming out this week with earnings. But digesting this Biden administration announcement that they're thinking about limiting chip exports, which I think would be just silly. And it would hurt U.S. businesses depending on who they decided to not sell chips to. All right, so that's exciting stuff. Again, it's all designed. Yeah, past performance, no indication of future results. You may lose some or all of it. Exactly. Thank you. My disclaimer's in the chat, folks. Now I have to have it right on the main screen. I'll probably do it right as the show starts. I'll see if I can get it thrown into the intro at the very beginning of the program. But yeah. All right, so that's great. I think I know it caused some consternation today. Maybe people feel a little, oh no, here we go. Look, market's fine with corrections. It's just going to give us an opportunity. There's the two that I'll be looking at tomorrow are going to be ASML and Intel for potential buying opportunities. For those that might be a little bit more risk averse, again, you always have SMH, which is a semiconductor ETF, down 5.4% on the day. That's always another option as well because it's so diversified. It will minimize that risk for you just slightly. Now, you guys might remember. Yeah. It's funny, Oliver, you say that. He says, thanks, Biden. But you remember Trump would do the same things as well. I'm putting a tariff on this country. I'm tariffing that country. No, I'm not going to tariff that. So it's not administration specific. This is universal. It's always going to be this tit for tat posturing. We're going to screw with this country. We're going to screw with that country. We're going to do this, that. Doesn't matter. Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Green Party. It's all going to be the same basic thing. And personally, I've while it frustrates me to see, X administration is doing this and X administration does that, bottom line is it gives us all opportunity to make money on these market moves. That's really all it is. We can shake our head and disapproval or approval as you want, but just try not to get wrapped up and emotional about the politics side and who did it. Just look at it and go, sweet, Biden administration wants to limit chip exports. I know right away that's going to hurt chip makers. Absolutely. So what do? I start looking for companies that are going to be big in that space. Number one's going to be NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA's going to get hurt on that one. Intel as well could get hurt if there's export limitations, but I don't know. I'm not. We got so many other things to worry about in life. I'm not going to get worried that it's this person or that person pulling the strings. I'm just along for the ride. I mean, I don't get pissed off at the bus driver if he misses a stop or hits the brake too hard. I just need to get to my destination overall. All right, speaking of that, interesting stuff. How many of you remember the conversation we had about, we had several, and maybe we need to do a much more in-depth conversation. But the conversation was about energy. Energy needed on many fronts. And that energy could have been looking at the EV revolution, which in my opinion, we don't have enough infrastructure to support everybody going electric vehicles, right? I went to NorCal last year, and on the way up there, there's a supercharger station right as you come down the Grapevine. Every one of the stalls was full with Teslas, and there was a huge line of people waiting to charge their Tesla. We just don't have the infrastructure yet. And by the way, there were diesel generators powering the charging stations, which I think is kind of ironic. Like, I don't want to use gas. I'm all electric, but I'm powering the electricity production with gas. Okay, makes a lot of sense there. Anyway, the question I think we talked about quite a bit was how do we increase energy production? Because not only are we going to see it with electric vehicles, but we're also seeing it with AI. And yes, the new Blackwell chip by NVIDIA is extremely energy efficient compared to legacy generations, but it's still using a ton of power. And if a company like Amazon or Microsoft or Google or Tesla is buying 100,000 of these Blackwell processors and putting them in massive warehouses, the energy grid is going to get taxed significantly. So we're like, well, how do you account for that? And I've raised my hand saying I think nuclear power is the way to go. I think let's get some nuclear power plants back up. Now I know because of a 3 Mile Island and things that have happened in the past, it has a real black eye on the industry. But I make the argument that we've gotten better. We understand how things work a lot better, and there's different technologies that will help keep things cooler so we don't get meltdowns. That's right, Liz says nuclear power. So I thought this was extremely interesting. This is going to go 2 topics at the same time. I'm going to do a double whammy. Number one is we have the potential for nuclear power plants throughout the United States that I think would really help offset all that energy consumption, whether it's EVs, AI, crypto mining, or just demand in general, which could also lower costs if we build these nuclear power plants. That's great. If we look at another side of this, it's, well, where's the investment opportunities? And we could certainly find the companies that are getting into that space, right? The companies that are at the forefront of nuclear power plant production and infrastructure and things like that. But then you could buy a company that maybe is investing in that space. And the name that comes to mind is Google. So if we look at Google, Google it's got so many different facets to its business, right? It's got driverless vehicles and AI firms. I mean, they're doing all sorts of stuff. It's probably one of the more diversified companies out there with all the different products that they have. They have partnered with a company called Kairos Power. And the plan is to get 7 new nuclear power plants, mini power plants that aren't the full, they don't look like this, right? This is the graphic I asked Midjourney to create for me today. These giant stacks that we're used to. I didn't see conceptual drawings of these, but they are much smaller reactors. And Google has partnered with them to produce 7 of them by 2035. The first one should be online by 2030. Now, here we are in 2024, tail end, so let's round it up to 2025. Kenny says Homer Simpson's office. It kind of does look like a Homer Simpson picture. You gotta love Midjourney. It probably did take Homer Simpson's colors because that really does look like. That's pretty crazy. Anyway, the reason I brought this up is I think it ties into what we were talking about. It also, I think, creates some great opportunities because if Google is investing, and they did not disclose how much is being invested in these, but I think you would agree that if a tech firm is kind of one of the backbones of the AI movement, I think we'd all agree that Google is probably in that space. And they are also in driverless cars because they own Waymo, and Waymo is driverless cars. I see Margaret saying, where can you use driverless vehicles? Where is it legal? You have driverless taxis at this moment in time. Waymo has them in San Francisco. I think they're in LA. I think they're in Phoenix. So they have driverless taxis around Waymo, and that's Google. Google's the parent of Waymo. So that's one of those pieces. Now all of a sudden you have a company who is a leader in AI and driverless cars. If they can also have their own power source, right? And because they're an investor and this get that power cheaper than anybody else, man, that really does put Google in a very interesting and powerful spot. I think every other company that we've talked about, like the big ones, all our Magnificent Seven, they're all reliant on other people's power. Without power, everything that they do shuts down. No computers, no internet. My product's not getting any use. No ad sales, no revenue, nothing. But if I am the guy who's providing power, and maybe I can keep everything up running longer, I can have cheaper power, therefore I'm making money off of you consuming the power, consuming the internet, consuming my AI. Man, it just seems like a win-win-win for Google. Now, I think Steve said in there, he says, Google is underpriced in my opinion. Well, let's check out the old GOOG. I'm in that same camp. I do believe that, personally, not because I'm looking at fundamentals, but just looking at the opportunities and things on the table for Google, I think Google's looking pretty darn good. Now, if you look at this picture, this could be construed as an inverse Head and Shoulders. It's abstract. I know we could probably draw lines across here. Let me draw that out more. Sometimes I hate snap mode, right? So there's your inverted Head and Shoulders, and that's your neckline. So the way that these work, for those who might be new and have never watched this program before, the way a Head and Shoulders works is it looks something like, it's on snap mode, let me turn that off. It looks something like this. 1, 2, there's your left shoulder, there's your head, there's your right shoulder. And it should look something like that when it's come to fruition. Now, how do we measure where it might go? You go from the top of the head to the neckline, which in this case, everything's inverted. That's why it's called an inverse Head and Shoulder. And I take this and move this to the upside, and that would give me a price target. If we broke above that 170 mark on Google, it would give me a price target of roughly $197. I'd round up to $200. So you got all this kind of really good news of AI, of driverless cars, of potential nuclear, which isn't going to happen for years. This could be one of those pieces, in my opinion, that starts to push Google up higher and higher and higher. They fixed some of their AI bugs. They had their AI issues a couple years back or a year ago, which a lot of people freaked out about and thought it was the end of Google. What do we got here? Multiple countries in Europe, including the UK, are building nuclear power stations. Yep. from a space footprint to energy output, it's one of the highest out there. Could we use solar? Sure. I was reading an article yesterday about how, Las Vegas has spent like multiple billions of dollars to build out those. Anybody here's ever driven from Los Angeles to Las Vegas? You come over the hill and you come around the corner and there's these fields just full of mirrors. And those mirrors are solar collectors. They all shine these mirrors up at a little receiver, which creates the energy, turns the turbines, and we get energy from that. And they've cost billions of dollars. And from the number I was reading, it makes about $100 million worth of power a year. And you spent multiple billions of dollars. So you're looking at 20 years just to earn your money back. Not the best use of capital. But if I can put $2 million in a nuclear power, or $2 billion in nuclear power plants that can generate far more electricity in a smaller footprint, that might be the way to go. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting how this all plans out. But I thought you guys might find that interesting about the Google reactor. I don't know if they'll call them the Google reactors. Ah, okay. I didn't know that one. That's a good one. So Big Eb says NuScale, SMR, is a great small nuclear power plants equity. Boy, been a hell of a chart too. Man, back in January, this thing was like less than $2, and now we're at $13.60. Not bad. Well, why don't you bring that one up earlier, Big Eb? Come on, man. You've been holding out on us. There's tons of those solar farms in Europe too. Yeah, I like the idea of a solar farm. I mean, we have the biggest nuclear reactor in the galaxy right above us. Well, for a few hours a day, it's right above us. I mean, the sun, why can't we harvest more there? I just think we haven't mastered that technology to get the greatest efficiency out of the sun. So until we get something like that. I also really like, I love the wave ones. I don't know if you guys have seen these, but they're like buoys that sit out in the ocean, and when the waves come, especially in big swells, it's like a generator that pumps we have all kinds of ways to generate power, but as far as bang for your buck, nuclear seems to be the way to go, and I think we'll probably see more and more of that. The company that was partnering with Google is called Kairos, K-I-R-O-S. I don't think they're publicly traded. Let me see. Kairos Pharma, Kairos Minerals. Yeah, I don't know if this is the one. I don't know if that's the one, but let's see. We will tell. No, this wouldn't be the one. So I looked up Kairos. It's definitely not Kairos Minerals, because if this was the company that's potentially going to build 7 nuclear reactors with Google, they would not be a penny stock. Definitely not. Down 31% today. Terrible day. All right, nuclear power plants, more like 400 billion in the U.S. Well, they didn't say how much these small ones were. These are not the big ones that the illustration shows here. Right? These are not monster. They're mini. They're like a micro reactor. Didn't say how much they generate. I will definitely be looking at those to see how much they generate from each of these mini ones. What do they look like? What's the environmental impact? Interesting. In my mind, like many of you, I always think of a nuclear reactor as this gigantic tower. Could it be like the ones that are from San Onofre down here in Southern California, which is now closed? It looked like it looked like two breasts sitting on the beach. Such a weird nuclear power plant. Check that one out. San Onofre. Yeah, they shut that one down a while back. But those windmills are eyesore. Oh, they don't like them for that. I don't know. I think especially in areas that are really windy, use them. All right, so that's pretty much it for today. There's one other. Someone sent me this graphic I had to share with you. We talked about XLF. We talked about financials and why they were doing so well, or at least the earnings numbers. I mean, everyone's beating earnings. Here's XLF. Back in October of last year, just a year ago, XLF was at $31. It's at 46 today. I'll call it 47. That is a incredible run and continuing to move. And the question is, where are they making all their money, right? Well, I think part of it is that rates have changed. And you look at the numbers, this graphic right here is going to really be shocking to I think a lot of people here. This is the bank's earnings from fees. So if you look at the amount of fees that Goldman Sachs earned, this is going back year over year by quarter. So quarter of 2022, quarter of 2023, quarter of 2024. Goldman Sachs, just in Q3 of this year, made $1.9 billion from banking fees. Bank of America, $1.4 billion in fees. JP Morgan, $2.3 billion in fees. And Citibank, $1 billion in fees. Blows my mind. Yeah, it blows my mind. So this is another reason that I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin. The fees are significantly lower, right? There's no middleman trying to gouge you. It's the network trying to stay up. So, you look at these companies, all of which have done very, very well. Let's bring up GS. Goldman Sachs on their earnings announcement. I mean, they went from 490 just a couple days ago to 522. Heck of a move. You got BAC, Bank of America, ripping to the upside. Of course, we have been talking about JP Morgan for a long time. They're absolutely fantastic. And you had Citi. Oops. There's Citigroup. There's Citigroup. $1 billion in fees. I read they had up to $45 and 45% profit. Would not surprise me. I mean, banks are designed to make money. Is it trading income or merger and acquisition fees that gave them big revenue? So I didn't get clarity on that. I went to try to find the image. My guess is it's fees overall. So M&A fees as well. So if they're doing a deal, I'm pretty sure that's going to be in merger and acquisition fees. But it'd be nice to get a breakdown of exactly how that's done, Margaret. I agree. I think it'd be nice to see how much they do in M&A. And I'm sure it's available on their earnings statement. You can probably look it up and find out where did those breakdowns in fees come from. So I'm curious how much of it was like retail customers, transaction fees. Nobody should be paying fees for your bank. Nobody. I used to get my safe deposit box for free, and now all of a sudden they're trying to charge me for that too. So I just close my safe deposit box. I'll move. All right, let me run through our broader markets today. And one thing we didn't talk about is, of course, Bitcoin, which had a great day today. There was a huge surge up, and the volatility on it was off the charts. But let's just go in here real quick and start with crude oil. So crude oil, I'm not sure why I had that line drawn right there. I think we were talking about it as potentially going back up to that downward sloping trend line was our target here, and we've seen that crushed after we came into this peak. We talked about that 77.60 mark, hit it. Now all of a sudden selling off aggressively. The question I have for crude oil is, does it get back down to these lows? Right? Does it get back down to that $65 mark that we established back in September? I don't know. It certainly has been a pretty aggressive 2-day sell-off here for crude oil. It was down 4.4% today, and a lot of that coming off of Middle East stuff, which I'll leave that alone. NASDAQ, of course, was crushed today predominantly because of the semiconductors and chip making stuff that went on, which we covered earlier. All in all, though, this chart still looks absolutely fantastic. So people were screaming and freaking out about a 1.34% down day. This looks great. Still uptrend. I've got this red line drawn on the screen here at 19,860 on the NASDAQ 100. It's not a great line. I could probably get a little bit better by going to where more points of contact are. Let's do that. Now, I prefer the more points of contact. It's right around 19,973. Getting a pullback down to that level would be totally acceptable. Probably will happen and should happen. The only area where this really gets bad for me is if it gets below these most recent swing lows. Then it's an issue. Otherwise, I'm still bullish on the NASDAQ and technology. I think it's still going to move to the upside. Did you cover the inflation picture changing and the expert questioning the coming rate cuts? I did not. I did not. There's your S&P. So now you've had that breakout. Do we get a bigger retest here? Right, a retest that comes back down and touches that top of that S&P breakout, which is 5,830. Again, picture looks fantastic. Don't let one day worth of down day freak you out. It'll probably be a couple of down days. Remember, we have some big earnings coming up this week, which should help out the markets, but we don't know which way those earnings are going to go. And based off what ASML did today, it may not be that great. Here's your 10-year. So that 10-year screamed back up over the past couple weeks. Big Eb, we should have changed the bet. I should have said, where is it at the end of the year? Is it at above 4%? But no, I still owe you a beer. Slight change in today's session, but if you look at the overall range for Tuesday, you had a slide in the 10-year of 1.85%. Now you're still at 4.034% for the 10-year. Again, higher that goes, the more pressure it puts on the housing markets. So we'll see how that pans out. Dollar index continuing its move. We hit that 103 mark, hesitated for a second, broke through it. After we get above these highs from August 8th, you're going straight up to 104. And I don't see anything to really slow this down at that point. So this has been an abrupt about face by that dollar index. This could, again, put pressure downward pressure on our equity markets if that dollar continues to surge like this. Be 6,000 by year end. Let's see. You think the S&P will be at 6,000 by year end? I'm pretty sure at some point it's going to hit it. I don't know if it'll be over 6,000 by the year end, but yeah, I mean, it's not that far away. You know, if we just do some simple calculations here and look at where the S&P is right now, let me, just from where we are immediately today to 6,000, I need to get to there. Let's just zoom in just a hair, call it there. You're looking at a 2.5% gain between now and the end of the year. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're going to 6,000 at some point between now and the end of the year. Absolutely. I don't see any reason not to. Russell 2000 was your third place finisher today. Look at that. Look at that shooting star. It's hit this for like the fifth time, that 2,288 level. Hit it again today, and you have a shooting star. Now, the volume on this one wasn't climactic by any stretch, so unfortunately, you know, no major panic moment there. But this does bode well for an argument of shorting the Russell tomorrow. Let me get rid of some of these lines because I got old lines on here. And we'll add one right below the shooting star of today, which is after a nice rally. I'll put snap mode on here, but bam. So if it gets down below 2,255, there's a short opportunity for you tomorrow. Let's see how that one goes. And then our last two here, gold. There's nothing technically on the gold chart that looks interesting at all, other than we're just in a beautiful uptrend. I can get rid of all these graphics because those are all dead now. That one's dead too. So at this point, gold looks fine. I'd like to see if this trend does continue. It's got to get up above those highs that we established back in September, but it's been lower lows, lower highs, or sorry, higher lows and higher highs. So all in all, gold looks great. And finally, man, Bitcoin was fun today. It's getting more and more interesting. And I know we've got a bunch of Bitcoin bulls in here and fans of Bitcoin. That's great. Here's our intraday chart of this bad boy on a 5-minute time frame so you guys can see what happened. It was wild swings here early this morning. So right after the equity markets opened up, right around 6:30, man, Bitcoin just took off. It went from 6,600 to 6,000 to 68,000 plus, and then fell from 68,000 all the way to sub 65, and then kind of ground its way back up, started to look a little bit better near the end of the day. Ultimately, we're at 67,200. No, we're not at 67,200. Let me go back to the spot. That's why I like spot. Spot trades 24. So we're at 66,200 right now on the spot price of Bitcoin. All in all, though, this is very good for any of us who are optimistic about this breakout. Why? Well, because we did break the highs. We didn't close above them, but we did break those highs from back on September 28th. Now the challenge will be getting us up to the 68,600 mark. And after that, I think you're challenging all-time highs, and then it's off to the races. So I'm very excited about Bitcoin and what it means. Marcus says flag in gold. Let's go check out the gold flag. You could call it. I mean, it would probably look more extreme on a weekly. And even there, I wouldn't even know if I'd call this a flag. I mean, it really didn't get much, but you could call it a flag. For me personally, I wouldn't. I just don't think that the up move up here is significant enough. With a flag, typically what you want is to have a much more extreme move up. Like it needs to be almost straight vertical and then that hesitation. This is just a beautiful trend, right? Beautiful trend that keeps on going. Let's see. Enjoy the roller coaster. That's MicroStrategy. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think some of you actually bought calls on MicroStrategy, right? I mean, that thing's been nuts. It was down 3.6% today for MicroStrategy. But, man, Michael Saylor's laughing all the way to the bank. MicroStrategy. I'd like to see what his compensation structure is. You know, because obviously we talk about how Michael Saylor has got all this Bitcoin. Michael Saylor doesn't have all this Bitcoin. Who has the Bitcoin is MicroStrategy, right? The company owns the Bitcoin. Well, I guess that's not true, right? We could all say that MicroStrategy owns all the Bitcoin, but if Michael Saylor has the private keys, then Michael Saylor owns the Bitcoin. Liz, how many coins do you own? Not enough. I think that's the question, the right answer from all of us is not enough. I mean, I wish I owned more, but I'm very content with the amount of crypto that I have at this moment. So let's go and look at our earnings calendars for mañana. As you can see here, ASML was supposed to report tomorrow morning. They had an error and they reported early. Here is who's reporting tomorrow. You have Abbott Labs, you have US Bancorp, you have CSX, Kinder Morgan, Volvo, see if their EV sales do really well. Las Vegas Sands, Discovery Financial, Equifax. You got a lot of big names. Synchrony Financial, Husqvarna Bank, Alcoa as well for aluminum there. Oh, man. Margaret, you got more than me? Okay. Well, I'm happy for you. I'm not mad at that at all. I hope you have a lot more than I do. And here's your economic calendar for... Let's go. There was one thing I wanted to bring up on that one, but let me just get to Wednesday so I can do that, and then I can walk out. As far as U.S. goes, you see here Wednesday the 16th. The only thing we have for the U.S. markets is import prices. There's really not much going on for U.S. and not much really for the rest of the world other than an unemployment number coming out for Australia. And the only reason I would say that's significant because if you look at the recent price charts of the Aussie dollar, you have this higher highs, higher lows trend that started, and it's been on a pretty ugly slide here. So we'll see if that unemployment data may impact policy decision or just the viewpoint of the economy for Australia. But they do have a announcement coming out tomorrow that you should check on with the unemployment claims. Now, let me go back to the economic calendar here, and I want to show you today, because I didn't get to this one. Obviously, my interest is that the U.S. economy does better and better and better and better and better. If you look here, our manufacturing numbers took a turn for the worst. Empire State Manufacturing Index, which most people believe is kind of the lead horse in the U.S. with regards to manufacturing. I don't know why, but that's just kind of the general consensus. We were at 11.5. They thought we'd drop to 3.4. Came out at 11.9 negative, so we're going the wrong way. And if we look at this historically, we have been predominantly negative since 2022. For the whole time, we've had maybe less than a dozen peaks above zero. Everything else has been below it. So this was not good. If you look at the trend that started on January of this year, it's been getting better and better and better. Last reading for September was a nice positive number. I think a lot of people were really kind of moving this to the upside. The trend was to the upside. That'd be great for the economy. Boom, we got a big shock to the system here at negative 11.9. So that's not good on the economic front. And that's pretty much it for economic announcements and earnings. I see Jesup MemD, Dr. J. There you go. Let's switch that name around. Dr. J wants to know about platinum. Okay, your platinum futures. I got to zoom way out here because I look at the chart, and while there might be some shorter term fluctuations that could be tradable, I don't see anything in here that really screams trend, right? It feels like it's like an EKG that's just kind of oscillating back and forth. And I'm going to put a horizontal line. It feels like you're oscillating above and below 978, right? You can see that the swings kind of seem to even out, at least in my opinion, seem to even out right there. I don't really like it. That's not one that I would buy just because I don't see a trend going. I'd rather see something on a nice trend. Now, if we look at the other metals, you look at palladium, palladium is not one that I normally trade. However, if you look at what's going on with it, it's had this aggressive sell-off. I mean, we were over $3,000 for palladium, and now it's down at $1,000. That's 66% discount. And now all of a sudden, you're starting to make some higher lows. Forget your love for the metal. Forget your feelings of the metal. It's what is the price chart telling me? And it looks like, in my opinion, palladium is rounding that corner and set for potentially a nice move to the upside here. So if I had to choose between platinum and palladium, I'm taking palladium all day because of what's going on with the chart. Platinum, I could just sit there for months and literally do nothing and nothing and nothing and nothing. Nickel. I don't usually look at nickel. Downtrend. Of course, silver has been looking great. Silver looks like it's just building more and more strength, consolidating to that top. It feels like you got an ascending triangle building. I'm so disappointed that my silver got taken away from me. And then copper, right? So copper is the more challenging one out of all that we just looked at. They had a great uptrend going for about 3 weeks, and all of a sudden it reversed, and now you got just screaming back down. I mean, I would go with that shorter term trend and be looking at shorting copper right now, but be ready because this thing is volatile and can change on a dime. So hopefully, Dr. J, I answered your question there on platinum. I would say out of all the metals, platinum and copper look the worst. From a tradable trend, at least on copper, I have trends that are tradable. If I look at platinum, it's not a lot here. It's just choppy. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for me. It is a Taco Tuesday, I got to go get ready for trivia. I've got 3 weeks left of trivia, and I'm throwing in the towel. It's been over a year. I host trivia every Tuesday night. Been doing it for, a year, and I spend so much time making the rounds, and I have just way too much stuff that's not getting done, like my book. That stuff needs to get finished, and I will hopefully divert the time I spent on my trivia to getting some projects done that I want to get done. So that will... That's my plan for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. If you have anything you want me to cover on tomorrow's program, you can email me at tradermerlin@gmail.com, or you can just put them down below any of the YouTube videos. Hope you guys have a fantastic remainder of your day and a good day tomorrow. We should probably see some good action in all those semiconductor stocks we talked about, so be careful. I'll see you tomorrow.